Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's planning control meeting. Nice to be back in the chamber face-to-face rather than over a 12-inch screen for the past 15 months. Before we go into the meeting, can you please either switch off your phones or put them on silent? We haven't got a fire drill planned, so if there is a drill, then let me go out first. Before we go on to anything else, there's a couple of things that Paul Clark will be telling you after I finish here. So, Paul, if you'd like to, where are you? Oh, God, I need some binoculars. Right. Yeah, Paul Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, councillors, members of the public. We're in familiar settings, but hosting a meeting constrained by the pandemic. There are mechanisms in place and risk assessments that we need to strictly adhere to. Councillors and officers are aware of these. Regular viewers of the Planning Committee will note that tonight's proceedings will be a little different from how we used to operate, despite the scenery being familiar. For those who have one of the very limited spaces in the gallery and those public participating in the chamber, we do need to ensure everyone's safety by ensuring that your seat and desk is cleaned as you arrive and before you leave the chamber. As a result of those watching at home, that change, when the cleaning takes place, might result in a slight delay between the items. We do intend to hear all those applications on tonight's agenda, except Arthur Street, which has been withdrawn from this meeting, I believe. So please bear with us as we embark upon a new form of committee meeting here in Derby City for the first time following the pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Moving on to the agenda then, are there any apologies from anybody?
Please, Chair. Councillor Hassel.
Late items to be introduced by the Chair, I have none. Declarations of interest, anybody? No.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. The item with regard to 46 Quorn Drive, Allestree. As a ward councillor, I've been heavily involved with both parties, both the objectors and those that want the application, in trying to do the best I can to guide them through the process. I just want it to be made clear that I come to this meeting with an open mind, no predetermination, and I'll base my questions and concerns, if any, on the paperwork supplied. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I don't doubt your integrity. Stephen, will that be okay?
Chair, that's fine. Chair, there's one further point I just need to advise members in terms of the voting, unless you wish to refer to it. Okay, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, for those of you that were on the committee the year before when we had a problem with the head count, so can you please, when you vote in, put your hand up as high as possible. You don't have to stand up, just put your hand up. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 15th of April 21. Move it. Anybody second that?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, minutes of the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, which was held on the 4th of March 21.
Noted.
Second that. Thank you. Going on to appeals decisions, item 6. And to tell us about that will be our one and only Ian Woodhead.
Many thanks, Chair. Nice to see you all again in person. A good set of appeal results for us to talk about tonight. Firstly, the land between Slack Lane and Etwall Street on the Uttoxeter Old Road junction. You'll recall this scheme. The resubmission was presented to the last meeting, and this scheme, which was refused against officers' recommendation and by committee, was dismissed. And you'll be interested to know that paragraphs 5, 6 and 7 give a fairly decisive dismissal of the height, scale and mass of the proposal. It was also dismissed on residential amenity grounds, notably outlook issues from the properties located opposite. There were no issues with the parking. I mean, that was an issue that was debated at the meeting, but essentially a good result was dismissed, and clearly shaped the resubmission that we talked about at the last meeting and that which Stephen Bate, who's now left the authority, presented. Secondly, Chair, 15 Strathmore Avenue was a proposal we had for an outline application for a single bungalow to the rear of the host property, access from Anthony Drive. We didn't like the impact of the illustrative proposal because it was outlined with just means of access applied for. We didn't like the potential impact within the street scene. So we refused permission under delegated powers, and the inspector agreed with us on those grounds. Third appeal was for a change of use from a dwelling to a house in multiple occupation. It's something that I know it's an area of planning applications that does interest members. We did deal with this one under delegated powers, refused it on 3 grounds. Essentially, the proposal also included an extension to the dwelling. The first reason for refusal centred on overlooking the oppressive massing impact of the development. The second issue looked at the lack of amenity space and the dominance of car parking. And the third reason was about the absence of tree preservation order detail relating to trees on the rear boundary of the site. So we refused it on 3 grounds, and the inspector agreed on 3 grounds. So it's good to note, and I know we do report various applications for houses in multiple occupation, but we don't agree with them all. So this one we refused, and it was dismissed roundly. And the final case, Chair, Friargate, it was retention of an automatic teller machine and its illuminated logo panel, and the inspector gave a good rehearsal of the issues. It's in the conservation area. We thought it would detract from the overall appearance of the street scene, and he agreed that it would detract from the consistent appearance of shop frontages in that location. He also referred to all the heritage policies and the statutory tests in the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act. So another good result, Chair, across a fairly broad spectrum of proposals. So that's a 100% record, and I'll take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Excellent. I mean, obviously, it's a good work put by you and all the officers in writing up our reasons for refusal. And, you know, as I said before the sort of end of the last meeting, whether it was myself going to be chair here or somebody else, one thing we have to do, regardless of which party we represent, is to look after the interests of our residents in this city. And houses of multiple occupation, where they're suited, we have no objection. We want to tell investors to come and, you know, invest their money in Derby and not anywhere else. But it has to be right for the community. It has to be right for the residents of that street, avenue, close or road that have been living there with their families for, you know, generations. So yes, we're open for business, but the right kind of business. And with the kind of decisions we've had in our favor, it just goes to show that we can, you know, have the right results with proper refusal reasons. Obviously, we have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, we are holding the public's purses, and we can't refuse any and everything for fear of a cost being awarded against us. But where we have reason to believe that the impact is going to be, you know, severe on residents, you know, around there, then we must be brave enough to say, well, enough is enough. Would anybody like to ask Ian any questions? Thank you, Ian. Development control performance, I believe that's you again, Ian.
Many thanks, Chair. Yes, nothing really to report, just to say that under part 10.1 of that particular report, there's a health and safety bit. I'd just like to say that, you know, it's been a pretty tricky time for officers within my team and other teams, because we've been working remotely and doing the best we can. And, you know, there are pressures with, you know, some colleagues are working in isolation, they live alone, and so we have a range of different personal circumstances. So I'm very pleased with the performance, and in the context of what we've been dealing with, I think we've done a sound job across all teams. That's, you know, the planning team and all our consultee colleagues. So I'll take any further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Not a question, Ian, at all, but just to put on record our continued thanks for the work that you and your team do, particularly, as you say, during the most trying period that you've had. Thank you.
Lucy?
Yes, thank you to everybody for keeping going in these times. I just want to ask, I know that one of the officers who was part-time has now left. Are we significantly understaffed, or are we managing to recruit?
We have yet to replace Stephen Bate. I mean, he was a pretty effective officer in terms of output. So I had a conversation with Paul about an hour ago as to the options open to fill his post. So yeah, it's something we're looking at very actively to fill his shoes, because he was a very experienced officer, and you know, his departure was you know, it's something that's left us without that capacity at the moment, but we'll hopefully fill it in you know, very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, once again, thank you from me, and as you've heard from other members, Ian, as always, we're right on top of things when it comes to performance, and even in this unprecedented 15 months or so, we're still very, very good, and that's all down to you guys and your hard work. Thank you. Item 8, which is applications to be considered. Now, we are going to change the order slightly. We're going to take Corn Drive first, simply because we want to get rid of Councillor Roy Webb, if that's okay. Right, so to tell us about this is Sarah Claxton.
Chair, could I make a proposal on this application before we start hearing the evidence from officers?
What do you propose then, Councillor Potter?
Right, I propose we defer this application and undertake a site visit. The reason I would like a site
Councillor
visit...
Potter, can I just stop you there? That will be discussed after everything is come forward. It's not up to just you saying that to me. Obviously, it will be put to the committee.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
acting under advice. of
Thanks for the proposal. I have no problem rejecting it. Sarah, you may continue.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few housekeeping items for members before we go into the main body of the report. It's circulated, members will see we've had some supporting information received from the applicant in response to the Highways Officer's comments, and she states that we have an intention to implement a dropped curb and block caving on the parking at the end of June. 80% of the appointments that she has are 2 and 2.5 hours long, 4 to 5 customers per day. We've also received 3 further objections from Mr and Mrs Burley, which make comparisons with the 2 appeal decisions, which are online and which are on the web. And they also raise concerns about loss of privacy from the windows on the front of the property, and comings and goings and traffic from the salon. I've also got a statement from the applicant, who was due to speak this evening, but she has instead sent a statement in. So I'd like to read that, if that's okay. She says, "My name is Samantha Stokes. I'm applying for change of use for a small 9 square metre garage into a hairdressing salon. There has been some confusion as to what my intentions are, and I would like to clarify certain aspects of my hairdressing business. Further to my response on the planning portal, I would like to reiterate that I work alone, also have no intention of expanding the capacity of my salon. I have no interest in employing another stylist or renting a second chair out to a subcontractor. This is the first time I've done a planning application, and to say the least, it's been an interesting experience, and to be honest, sometimes very upsetting. I've worked closely with the case officer, Rory Hillman, over the planning period. Each considered element has been accepted and approved by the council's planning team. The latest development was a revised response from the Highways Department, who have stood by their initial response that this proposal presents no serious issues. They have suggested we extend the drop curb leading to our driveway, which has previously been surveyed and quoted on the 16th of February 2021 by their department, along with the finishing of the hard standing to our drive that is planned for completion in due course. As far as I'm concerned, if my neighbours have any issues, all the points of concern have been addressed, considered and resolved to the satisfaction of Derby City Council. I have 2 chairs and 2 parking spaces. The Highways Department have stated they have no serious issues with the application. They are also agreeable that it presents little controversy with regards to aspects of the planning application of this nature. Controversial points raised by my objectors are imaginative without substance or any evidence. I'd also like to add that I have completed all the required requests in a timely manner to asked by Mr Hillman, including the spatial planning test to the satisfaction of that department. Due to the addition of frosted glazing, there are no direct views in or out of my salon. It does not affect any loss of view for other neighbouring properties or affect property values, issues with boundaries or rights of way. My ×2 chair salon in no way can compete with or affect any other local hairdressing salons due to its size, location and intentions. For whatever reason, the malicious campaign that surrounds my application is beyond belief, and I have found it shocking why individuals who do not live near me have any objections at all when this application carries no direct impact on other street other than Corn Drive itself. It leads me to believe that individuals may have been influenced or coerced from far and wide. Repetitive copy and paste comments from objectors have either been dismissed as inflammatory or emotional without fact or been addressed between the council and myself. Due to life and health issues, I have to downsize from a large salon with members of staff and sunbeds to a more manageable size that I can easily handle on my own. I wish to keep this salon as it is my career and livelihood. Hairdressing is what I do and all I do and who I am. Ask for the committee to look favourably on my application, as I have no plan B. Thank you for your time. I just now go on to the main body of the report. This is a retrospective application for change of use of an integral garage of a residential property at 46 Corn Drive to form a hairdressing salon which is in use class E. The salon has been operating since last year, except during periods of lockdown. The permission is sought to retain the use, which is solely for the owner of the dwelling house to work from home. The only external change is to the front of the dwelling is a replacement of the garage doors with a UPVC entrance door with 2 small windows, which you can see on the screen. The provision of 3 parking spaces on the frontage are indicated by the applicant, who has confirmed the proposed works to extend the drop curb and hard surface of the front garden to form the 3rd parking space. Highways officers raised no objections to the use, subject to conditions to secure the works to the parking area being carried out within 1 month of any permission. Highways colleagues also recommend a personal permission for the applicant, such that the salon would only operate as part of the main dwelling. These conditions are all set out in section 8 of your report. The applications attracted a large number of representations to the proposal, with 50 objections and 60 supporting comments. Those in support point out it's a single hairdresser, the impact of the pandemic on business, working habits, and the limited impact on the character and traffic in the street. Objections raise concerns about increased activity in a quiet residential area, harm to residents' amenities and privacy, limited parking, and that such uses should only operate in shopping areas. Hairdressers are uses which are normally directed to define centres in the shopping hierarchy to meet the requirements of policy CP13 of the core strategy. The applicant is required to undertake a sequential assessment of suitable in-centre units. A statement has been provided for this application which has demonstrated that all such available units in Park Farm Centre and other city centre locations were too large for the applicant's needs, so we are satisfied that the policy test has been passed. The main consideration is therefore whether the proposed hairdressing use is appropriate in this residential context. In coming to the decision, we have had regard for 2 recent appeal decisions for similar uses in residential areas elsewhere in the country. One was approved and one was refused. And in the context of this proposal, the use would generate additional traffic with customers coming to and from the property, so there would be some impact on residents' amenities, although the Environmental Health Officer has not raised any concerns in terms of noise or disturbance from the proposed use. Given the operation is for a single hairdresser and the occupant of the dwelling, with the benefit of 3 parking spaces and restrictive conditions to limit the extent of the use and the operating hours, we consider that it would not be so harmful to residential amenity to justify a refusal in this case. Overall, the proposed hairdressing use would be acceptable in our view in this residential setting, in terms of its impacts on character, traffic, highway safety and the amenity of neighbouring properties, subject to the conditions which are set out in your report. It accords with the intentions of the local plan policies and the MPPF, so we recommend approval subject to those suggested conditions. You have 2 speakers and Councillor Webb is also wanted to speak to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah, would Highways like to add anything to that?
Chair. I'm doing this one. No, I think afterwards, Chair, if that's all right, we'll listen to the speakers, and then if anybody's got questions, then I think. Thank you.
Chair, can I just come in on the point? We've had a proposal by Councillor Potter as regards deferral, sort of for a site visit. And I think it's probably appropriate, before we invite sort of public speakers to speak, to hear from Councillor Potter in relation to the reasons for deferral, and sort of take a vote on whether a site visit is required by committee.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Potter, you may put your case forward for deferral.
Thank you, Chair. A very contentious planning application, actually. The supporters live outside the area. The objectors live inside the area. Although it doesn't quite show on that map, the whole area is a cul-de-sac going from Quorn Drive up through to Ashbrook. I propose a site visit quite simply because I feel once members of this committee have viewed that application, there may well be further conditions applied. The applicant says that most of her customers will actually walk to and from the salon. Now, I don't know about you, and there's Tracy here, I don't know how many young ladies go to a hairdressing salon, spend a lot of money, then walk to and from a hairdressing salon. I really don't know. I know my wife wouldn't. And then there's other activities at the site. We've got to remember that she purports to be a hairdresser, but also there was beauticians issues mentioned. For saying she's got health issues, she's going to be working 10 hours a day for six days a week. You put a very eloquent speech in at the start about looking after our residents. And I think that's why we need to have a site visit. We need to look after our residents and make sure that this application, whether it's passed or not, is right. And if further conditions are required, then those conditions, for the sake of our residents, are met. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Very well put there. Members of the committee.
Chair, somebody needs to second whether they want a site visit.
I was just going to say that, members of the committee, would anybody like to second that?
Chair, I've got a question because Jed's raised a number of points which, sorry, Councillor, has raised a number of points which we ought to be considering, but I'm not clear as to what we're going to gain from having a site visit to look at a semi-detached house on a fairly average, probably 1930s, possibly 1950s street, where we've got the map in front of us and photographs available. So could you clarify what we would gain by having a visit?
With your permission, Chair, I think the first thing we've got to look at is the parking. We've been supplied with photographs that show vehicles being parked on there, but they overhang the pavement, blocking the pavement. Also, you've got to look at where it's situated and how would customers walk to it. So I think we need to look at the very makeup of that area and how people are going to walk and where they're going to walk from. You know, we discussed in council the other night, didn't we, about insecticides, etc. Well, hairdressers use a lot of chemicals. We've got to look at the disposal of those chemicals. There's a number of really important issues here, I feel, that we've got to make sure, as a planning committee, we get right for the sake of that whole suburb. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Would somebody like to second that? Job.
I'll second that.
Can we have a vote on that then? All those in favour of deferring this and having a site visit? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 5. I'm voting for a site visit, seeing as Councillor Potter's put me in the spot there with my opening speech, so I can hardly go against that. So it'll have to be a site visit, and it's a casting vote that I have, so I'll vote in favour of a site visit. Okay. Councillor Webb, you don't have to speak. You can go home and watch Last of the Summer Wine. Aye. You're always welcome here, Roy. Just not in meetings. Okay, back to the agenda now then, and pages 1 to 32 is the land at Ricknell Road, Derby. And to tell us about that is Ian Woodhead.
Many thanks, Chair. First and foremost, in terms of housekeeping, the penultimate paragraph in 7.3 indicates that negotiations have been ongoing to secure the footway cycleway link through the site to serve the wider development area within the AC20 land allocation. I can report that the principle of the route has been secured, and full details of its future layout will be addressed by condition. So it's to future-proof that link to serve the wider allocation. Secondly, the safeguarding period for that route, as highlighted as 5 years within the second bullet point of part 8.5, is yet to be agreed. So the 5-year period for safeguarding that is still open for discussion, but we're pleased to report that we've got the principle of the route secured. On to the main report, Chair. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a care home with associated access, car parking and landscaping. The proposed development would be a purpose-built residential care facility for older people. The scheme has been developed in a configuration which enables the facility to provide for 2 types of care, general residential and residential dementia, and its plan layout and internal arrangement allows the home to be split into the separate care requirements. The proposed care home would provide 66 bedrooms in total, with associated communal and service areas, including a small ancillary cafe and cinema. The building would be 2 stories in overall height, measuring approximately 9.5 metres to the highest part of the ridge and approximately 5.2 metres to eaves height. The proposed care home would have a H-shaped footprint, approximately 55 by 41 metres in floor area, with a central hub area providing lounge and dining facilities from which 4 bedroom wings would extend. It would be set approximately 16 metres back from the site frontage within a landscaped area providing secure garden areas for residents. And to crystallise the large amount of information in your report, Chair, the following issues are central to this application. Firstly, the development plan. There are no overriding objections to the proposal in the context of the ambitions of policy AC20. Members who've been on this committee for some time will know that the policy was previously H9 in the adopted City of Derby Local Plan Review, and it's now policy AC20 in the Derby City Local Plan Part 1. It is important to note that the application for the Aldi food store, which is to the north east of the application site, includes a commitment to safeguard an area of land for employment uses in line with policy AC20, and also to safeguard a connection through to Hollybrook Way. And this latter commitment would be replicated in the 106 for this application, given that a material start has not been made on the Aldi application. This application overall contributes to the supply of housing on a strategic site. It would in itself provide employment opportunities, and it secures the footway, the future footway cycleway connection from Ricknell Road to serve the wider allocation. And some members will recall the accompanying supplementary planning document that accompanied policy H9, which showed those pedestrian cycleway connections. Secondly, Chair, in terms of access and parking, there are no overriding objections to the proposal on access and highway grounds, and your report highlights that vehicle movements associated with the proposed care home during the AM and PM peaks are relatively small, and as a result are unlikely to have any material impact on the highway. Andy's here tonight if you need to ask any questions about the overall traffic and transportation components. The location of the site access is consistent with that approved under the Aldi application, and we are satisfied that the junction would operate safely with both the retail food store development and the care home in place. Thirdly, design and amenity issues. The two-storey scale of the proposed development would be commensurate with existing development in the vicinity of the site, and the proposal would sit at a slightly lower level compared with the adjacent houses, such that the development would not appear unduly prominent within the street scene. Overall, there are no overriding design objections raised to the scheme, and it is considered that the proposal would meet with the design aspirations contained within policies CP3 and CP4 of the Local Plan Part 1. In terms of impact on neighbours, Chair, subject to these suggested conditions, the scheme is not considered to have an unreasonable impact on the amenity of neighbours through increased noise and disturbance or other amenity considerations, given the spacing of the building and what's included in the internal floor plate configuration. On the ends adjacent to the neighbours to the south are largely circulation areas, so bedrooms would be sort of facing front and rear as opposed to in that south westerly direction. So we're satisfied that the spacing with those neighbours is acceptable. Therefore, Chair, we are satisfied that the proposal complies with Safe Policy GD5 of the adopted local plan review, which states that planning permission for development will not be granted where it results in unacceptable harm to the amenity of nearby areas. In terms of landscape and biodiversity, there's been some extensive work carried out in relation to 2 protected oak trees that are on the site and 2 oak trees that are just slightly off-site. So during the life of the application, the juxtaposition of the development of those trees has been thoroughly looked at in the context of arboricultural reports. There will be some impact on protected trees, and subject to conditions relating to a mulching regime and the implementation of construction and protection methods, there are no overriding objections. Further work relating to the provision of the cycleway footway needs to be addressed by condition to ensure that it does sit happily with a nearby oak tree, and that the biodiversity metrics are properly understood for the resultant landscaping scheme, which again can be addressed by condition, Chair. And in terms of other environmental factors that are broached in your report, as the report concludes, there are no silver bullet issues relating to noise, land contamination, archaeology or land drainage, subject to certain conditions. So we feel that the case officer's done quite a lot of work on this application, and we feel we've got everything tied up with the legal agreement and the conditions as abbreviated in your report. And in conclusion, Chair, the proposal would provide high quality accommodation for older people, which would also contribute towards the city's housing needs and provide a valuable specialist housing facility in the area. With suitable safeguards in place, it is considered that the development would not prejudice the delivery of policy objectives across the wider AC20 allocation, which is of course an important factor. We've tried with these separate applications to ensure that it's knitted together with the wider land allocation, and we feel that this has the potential to provide a further stimulus for further development across the wider allocation. Therefore, Chair, I promote the recommendation in Part 8.1 and there are no speakers to invite to address committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ian, would Highways like to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. Andy Gabbard from Highways Domain Control. I don't have a presentation this time, so if I'll just take questions on it if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Members of the committee? Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I'm disappointed that we are yet again not getting a comprehensive look at the whole of this AC20 H9 site, and we're picking off another little bit of it, whereas we actually wanted it to be looked at in the whole to make sure that we are getting a fair expectation of not just employment but also services, which I think the employment would be providing for the wider Heatherton and now Highfields Farm in South Derbyshire community. Because yes, we need care homes, and there are others in this locality already, and they do provide employment. But if we looked at this area comprehensively, I think we might not be putting this on that location. I think we might be putting it within a more residential area of that wider allocation. So I'm disappointed that we are not looking at it comprehensively, and I'd like an explanation back from officers, a bit more than is in the report, as to why it's acceptable to do this again piecemeal. We know that the report mentions that in 2008 we had a planning application in for this area, and nothing is yet seen on the ground as a result of that, although it was approved. It wasn't 2008. 2008 was 2010. Anyway, it was probably 10 years ago that the previous application was approved, but the Section 106 was never agreed. And therefore, I don't think that to safeguard the pedestrian route for 5 years, or the availability of land for non-housing uses for potentially only 3 years, I think it suggests, is anything like long enough. Because in terms of the planning history for this area, that was passed 3 times over in one case. So if we are going to pass something like this, then we need to safeguard the route for the period of time it takes to develop the land to the rear, and make it dependent not on a period of time, but on the redevelopment of the land on the rear. Whether that is in 2 years' time, or 20 years' time, or even longer, we need to have that footpath safeguarded to give access for when that land to the rear is redeveloped. That's in my view. And I think that is what officers should be expecting in terms of a Section 106 agreement for that redevelopment. There was quite a lot of discussion about flooding and the flood issues in this area, and I've recently had some casework on a different site where the construction management plan didn't include a flooding consideration. But so having spoken to one of the officers, the flood defence team, because we've got flood problems, he was surprised that there wasn't one included. So I would ask that we include a flood element to the development management plan, if that's the right term. It shouldn't be a problem, but it would just safeguard to ensure that somebody is thinking about those issues while they're doing the construction work. A point of detail is the access point for the small car park, 20 places. It's probably going to be a busy pavement, and it's not clear here whether that is actually a curbed crossing or a dropped crossing. And 20 people, and I think it was something like a maximum of 20 car movements in an hour through that gap. There should be more pedestrian movements along that road to try and gain access to the supermarket, or potentially in the future to connect through to Hollybrook Way. And that needs to be a dropped crossing and not a curbed crossing, whatever it is at the moment. I think, Chair, those are my main points, and I welcome any comments. Oh, no, other point is there's talk about the cinema and the cafe. Now, are those open to the public? And if so, what is the expected usage of those, both in terms of additional transport, traffic movements and pedestrian access? Because the pedestrian access is from the front, whereas if people are walking to gain access to those facilities, they may be coming from other directions, such as through the car park, and I don't know if that is being properly looked at in terms of safe pedestrian access through the car park. Thank you.
Are you sure you've finished now, Lucy?
I may come back with something else, Chair, but that's it for now.
Ian, would you like to come back on any of the concerns?
I'm happy for Councillor Carr to say what he needs to say and then come back on anything that he needs to add also.
Okay, yeah, probably a good idea. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think Councillor Kerr has comprehensively gone through all of the points I was going to make. I would just add that we are disappointed in terms of the access, because the access and the future access to Hollybrook Way. The access for this site was hijacked by the supermarket, who insisted on having access off the main road when the access should really be off Hollybrook Way. We've lost that particular argument, but I want to ensure that if that access to Hollybrook Way is opened up, that is still a feasible way of accessing the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I share Councillor Kerr and Councillor Carr's disappointment about the way that the site's not been delivered in a timely fashion. I did proofread that committee report over Christmas 2011, I think it was. And yeah, I think it's been an unfortunate combination of timing. The market was in a slump then, following 2008. Landowner expectations have been a tad unrealistic on that wider site, and it's not been an easy site to negotiate. So, with this proposal, we appreciate that it's a standalone application, but what we feel it doesn't do, it doesn't prejudice the development of the wider site. It stands there. It's got a reasonable site frontage, and it provides that connection through with the safeguarding of that footway cycleway. I think it is it's an important component of that overall scheme. It provides a form of housing that is obviously important with an ageing population. So I think, whilst it would be preferable to have a more comprehensive scheme on the eastern parcel and the western parcel of that allocation, we're not prejudicing that development, and we are keen, and there are housing developers in the wings waiting to look at the wider part of the eastern portion of that allocation. So that will be something that hopefully does come forward in the very near future. In terms of the flooding issue that Councillor Kerr raised and the construction management plan, I'm sure we can add something to that condition. The crossing also, subject to Highways Development Control, we can clearly negotiate that or insist on a dropped and taper curb solution, if that's okay with my colleagues. And as for the cinema and cafe component, it looks to me like it's all going to be an ancillary component to the care home. The cafe, the cinema only has a floor area of 26 square metres, so it's pretty small. So I would have thought it's just there to serve residents, but we can tie that up with a condition if you feel that's necessary to ensure that it doesn't get used for wider usage. But by virtue of its overall size, I think that's fairly unrealistic. And I think that's about it, unless Councillor Kerr can pull me up on anything there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Chair?
Yes, I was just going to say, Lucy, would you be acceptable to you in what Ian's saying about conditioning the cafe?
Well, actually, I think it's the other way around. That I think that to have a small cinema in that area, and it would then be a potential facility for people there to be able to, I don't know, maybe people could come in for a party, for a sharing of particular event, and I have no objection to that being a facility that would be rented out, provided that it is included within the travel plan and it is not going to be an undue burden on the community. Because an asset, at the moment, people have a long way to go to get to see a cinema. And places like Quad in Derby, you can hire for an event. Maybe you could hire this for an event when you want to show something to, as part of a, I don't know, 20th wedding anniversary celebration or a 80th birthday party or something. It could be an asset, so I don't want to restrict its use. I just want to make sure that we are considering its use and the implications of that. And the same goes for the cafe, because again, that might be a facility for the local area rather than something that we want to push away. My concern is the timescale for ensuring that we are getting access through into the rear of the AC20 site, shown in orange on the drawing in front of us, and also the time we've got to actually find people who want to do a commercial development in that area, for which I think the limit was given as 3 years, which is far too short an area, because notoriously this is something that is difficult to find, and it needs to be something which is given as long a period as possible, not as short as possible. That access is needed to whatever goes behind, not a timetable.
Thank you, Lucy. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ian?
Well, we are negotiating the time frame for the footway cycleway, as I indicated. It says 5 years in the report, but that's still to be agreed. And then the route through up to Hollybrook Way in the other parcel of land owned by Heatherton Developments is safeguarded for 10 years. That's correct, isn't it, Rach? Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that's safeguarded. And in terms of the cafe and cinema, that would be a commercial decision for the operator. Clearly, they've got residents to consider, safeguarding issues, but if it was, commercially viable and something that they would want to do, then there would be no real objection to it. But it's obviously in the middle of their block, and whether they want people in there with the residents that they have got would be open for them, and it's their obviously commercial choice to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Well, it's difficult to have concerns, reservations, or objection to something that isn't there at the moment, Lucy. So, with that in mind, does anybody else? Sorry. Yes, Andy.
Sorry, Andy Gibbard, HTC. I'd just caution against the cinema and cafe sort of opening that up. They haven't assessed that. So they presented their assessment based on the care home only. So, whilst it may not be an issue, they haven't put that forward. So in terms of trips and parking, etc.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else like to say anything? Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. It was just something that we discussed at pre-agenda, something on the conditioning of that footway, that cycle pathway, that the lighting, soundproofing and landscaping be appropriate for both those using the pathway and for those in the residential home, and getting the right balance so that, for instance, lighting safety on that pathway doesn't intrude into any, I think it's southwest facing rooms on the residential home, but also so that the residential home doesn't then feel like some sort of fortress. So just appropriate landscaping, lighting and soundproofing if necessary.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor West raised that at pre-agenda. It was an important point, and we would have like a condition that has a sort of intervening landscape plan and then a landscape plan with the footway cycleway in situ, with obviously boundary treatment, lighting, any lighting, etc. included in that. So yes, we would flesh that out in one of those conditions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. If there's nobody else wanting to speak, would somebody like to move it to the vote?
Or you've taken a vote on the resolution together with the additional conditions to cover the flooding and the management, construction management that Ian proposed.
Are we
response
okay to take them both in one go?
Yes, I mean you can if you're taking a vote with the resolution together with those additional conditions as suggested by Ian to cover Lucy's points in terms of the, as I said, the flooding issue and the management construction.
Okay, would somebody like to move it to vote with the additional conditions?
I'll move it, Chair.
Chair, may I just ask for clarification on one other point, Chair?
Go on then,
it's
Lucy.
condition 21, which says a condition controlling construction of the vehicle access from Ricknold Road prior to occupation of the care home and requiring detailed drawings of the access to be submitted for approval. Sorry, I understood, Chair, that the access, the construction work was not allowed to start until the access road, which is part of the Aldi condition, was constructed, so that there would not need to be further damage to the access from Ricknold Road and the damage to the natural landscape by the oak tree, etc. So I don't understand that condition 21 and what it is trying to say.
Would somebody like to?
Yeah, it's just to ensure that obviously the main access is in situ prior to occupation of the care home, so it's properly served from the public highway. That's my understanding of it. And just the details of it.
I need to go back, but I thought that there was a mention in the narrative earlier on that they would have to do all the construction from the Aldi access route, and therefore that would need to be completed before they could start the construction work on the care home.
Yes. So it says condition controlling construction of the vehicle access from Ricknold Road prior to occupation of the care home. So ensuring that that's all.
Not before the occupation, but for the start of the construction.
So I'll confirm that, Councillor Kerr. I mean, that's probably I think that's probably a highways DC condition, is whether that's pre-commencement.
Chair, with permission, if we don't get if they are going to construct...
Just 1 second, I believe Mr. Chamberlain can clarify something for us.
Thank you, Chair. Look, if I can help, I will. This is a standalone application. What if Aldi doesn't get built? They'll have to build the road, but they have to build the road. They need a construction access first, don't they? So they've got to get in. So we will need details of construction access before we get anything else if they were to build the road. I think it's highly unlikely that a care home will build the access road, to be perfectly honest. It would be fairly expensive, wouldn't it, for that sort of development? I'm fully expecting the Aldi to build the road and then them to build off that. But who's to say that Aldi ever doesn't get built? It's got consent. It doesn't have to be built, does it? So I think, without having those conditions in front of me, I think you're talking about construction access, weren't you, Councillor Kerr? So I think the construction access to let them get in, and then they would have to build the road before the care home is operational. That's how it...
Chair,
Councillor Kerr.
the access road from Ricknold Road its construction is special so as to protect the TPO'd oak trees adjacent to it. If we don't get that fully constructed, it won't be suitable for taking heavy vehicles over for doing the building construction. So we need to have that road constructed before the either Aldi or the care home is actually built. So the condition should be looking at the construction of the vehicle access from Ricknall Road, not prior to occupation, but prior to construction, because otherwise we will end up damaging the oak tree.
Can I just have some clarification? We seem to be going around in circles. Is the building of the sort of care home dependent upon the Aldi slip road there?
No, as Paul said, it's highly unlikely, but it could be built by the care home developers, in which case that condition would bite. It would require them to put in that access road first. So it would just be a case of tweaking that condition so it's pre-commencement, not pre-occupation.
Right, okay. Well, as Mr. Chamberlain said, I can't see the care home building that road because it'd probably cost them as much as the care home itself, right? But did you want to ask anything else, Lucy, before we put it to the vote?
No, Chair, if we can alter, as Ian's just suggested, if we can alter that condition as he's suggested, then I'm happy with that. And then we've got the construction management plan to include the flooding. But, Chair, I am really concerned that we need to be giving ourselves more than 5 years or 10 years to enable the employment elements to be constructed on this site, and particularly the footpath through.
Can I just say something, Councillor Kerr? I appreciate what you're saying, but we have to judge what's in front of us as well and not try to put in extra. We can't say to them, well, because of employment, you'll have to do this and you'll have to do that, because at the end of the day, economics will drive when they build it, and if they get the permission, there's nothing to say they're going to start straight away. So is that something that we can introduce in any way, Ian?
Chair, just to clarify, the employment land is already safeguarded through the Aldi permission, because that obligation came into force on the signing of that Section 106, so the issuing of the planning application permission. So this application doesn't consider the employment land. It's only the safeguarding of the north-south link that we're safeguarding.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move to the vote with the additional conditions?
Chair, can we ask officers to negotiate not a time period, but a need for access clause on that route, so that when the land to the rear is redeveloped, we have until the time when that land is redeveloped to take over that access route? It might actually mean that we bring forward development faster.
For the last time, Ian, if we could just get some clarity so we can go to the vote.
So the north-south link road, the idea would be to replicate the obligation in the Aldi permission, because that's only not in force at the moment because the Aldi hasn't commenced, and that is an obligation to maintain that in perpetuity, that safeguarding. So until the north-south link road, so until the rest of the development comes forward and that highway link is required. As we've said, the cycleway period, that's still in negotiation. So obviously we can bear those comments in mind for that. Thank you.
Thank you. For the third time, Councillor Potter, are you proposing to...
Chair, I'll gladly move it for you.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor West. Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation with the additional conditions?
No, I'm not going to.
That's carried. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I didn't see anybody not put their hand up. Was it you, Mike, that didn't vote? No, I'm abstaining. All right, okay, we have one abstention. And it's two abstentions, actually. Okay, thank you very much. Before I go on to the next item, actually, I'd just like to apologize to the new members for not welcoming you. you know, for the last 16 years been so used to just looking through the middle because all the councillors sit here and the officers sit over there. So apologies to all of you. Welcome to the committee, and I hope you have a good time while you're here, like all of us do, and we look forward to it. So the next item is so it's pages 33 to 67, vacant land, Uttoxeter New Road, Talbot Street. And to tell us about that is Mr. Paul Clark, who's sitting on the proper side today.
Thank you, Chair. Before I do mention this, on your behalf, I did mention and welcome the 3 new members earlier. We had a very brief training session to bring them up to speed. What I would do, a plea to all members, if when the committee reports are published, you might wish to do your own site visits, to visit the application sites, familiarise yourselves, as I laid out to the 3 members earlier this evening. And of course, there will be training throughout the year anyway.
I was just about to say, Paul, can we do what we did a few years back, and that's to have sort of regular training instead of just a day, you know, maybe have sort of shortened sessions like we did it once.
We're always learning, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This item, erection of a food store and access car park landscape and associated works. Chair, members, you will have received a recent letter from the applicant that we circulated earlier this week. In it, the applicant is confirming that they are happy to provide a contribution through a Section 106 agreement towards the Mickletover-Mackworth cycle route. Some members may know it as the Mick-Mack route, I know I do. As members may recall, that route links this area to the wider residential areas of Mickleover and Mackworth, avoiding the road network. The note also refers to the precise wording of the 15% comparison goods restriction and how condition 18 could be worded. Many members will be familiar with this site and its history. The proposal is the erection of a food store with access, car parking, landscaping and associated works. A separate egress from the car park is proposed east onto Mercian Way, and the principal access is off Uttoxeter New Road, close to the western boundary. Exit from this access would be left turn only. On pages 34 and 35 of your report, you will note the site history, and this is particularly important. Particularly the last reasons given for a food store, refusal for the food store on this site in 2019. This was refused on design and street scene grounds, and due to the absence of information regarding impact on the setting and significance of nearby designated heritage assets. The applicant, in the current submission, has sought to address those specific reasons. An earlier refusal also contained a highway reason for refusal, but in the 2019 refusal, and that was the last one we had, it was agreed that the access details were acceptable. Indeed, those access details are similar in the current scheme and are supported by the Highway Authority. In effect, the new application has therefore focused on overcoming those design and impact on historical assets concerns. You will note that during the application, the design has evolved to show to the details shown on screen. This design has been subject to consultation, as you would expect, and you will note that the Conservation Area Advisory Committee has raised no objections, considering it appropriate to the context of the area. My Conservation Officer on pages 46 and 47 confirms no objections on heritage grounds. Returning to the applicant's recent letter and the suggested 15% comparison goods restriction, this would accord with adopted policy CP13, as explained on page 55 of your report. And for clarity, is included in condition 19. Condition that, as you members may recall, we abbreviate our conditions, give a flavour so we know what we're approving or what we're dealing with, and then we bulk out the wording of those. Now, condition 19 would contain the following restricted items, and I've lifted this straight from paragraph 5.13.8 of the local plan, and that describes the types of goods that may be included in this category. Will include, but not be limited to, and forgive me, clothes, footwear, toys, sports goods, sport and leisure clothing, ornaments, computer software and games, telecommunications equipment, including mobile phones, small consumer electrical goods, stationery, artwork, supplies, greeting cards, etc., etc., etc. I've missed out the jewellery, watches and things. So it is those type of goods and any other use where an out-of-centre location is not really required. What we will have, Chair, is those restricted goods as listed in the local plan reproduced in condition 19 of any permission. You also note that condition 18 requires the existing Normanton District Centre store to be retained for 3 years from opening of this store. And as the applicant suggests, this should be a restriction on trading from the New Toxton New Road store if at any time in the first 3 years from opening the existing Normanton store ceases trading. So it's a similar sort of thing, but it's a twist on the wording. We can work with that wording and we can refine it subject to members' agreement. You will note that there has been no in principle objection to this use of this site, either historically or now. So a retail store in this location is acceptable. With amendments in place, we have finally arrived at a welcome reuse of a brownfield site that will meet the needs of the local population, as indicated by the overwhelming letters of support, which has an acceptable access, egress provision, and is of a design that is acceptable to both the Conservation Area Advisory Committee and to our conservation area. Chair, I commend the revisions secured to this long-awaited scheme, and Chair, you have no speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Would Mr. Chamberlain or Andy like to add anything before we open it up to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this has been a difficult site. If you recall, when it first came and I refused it, or I recommended it, refused, sorry. Since then, they have changed it a little bit. They're going to do some roadworks in front of it to provide a right turn into the site. And if you remember from when I was telling you, that equally provides a right turn into Great Northern Road where the school is. So there's quite a big scheme to go on the front. And the other thing about this is, if you remember, the difficulty, I thought anyway, having seen the conditions that existed when I looked at it, you would never be able to turn right out. So what they've effectively done is put an access onto the ring road. And I said, it's not something we like doing, but we think that's the only way you'll ever get this site away. On top of all of that, of course, the council has very recently finished its air quality scheme. And when you drive down to Uttoxeter Road, that is quite evident what they've done now. We've actually removed a lane. Now, I don't know how that's operating yet. The pandemic has changed everything. The traffic's not as busy as it was. I don't know whether it will ever be as busy as it is. But what generally happens in these stores, you don't get a lot of new trips during the busiest times, because you'd be crazy to go there. So the trips that will be coming in during the busiest times, sort of at PM peak, will be people who are driving past it. You know, it's not new trips effectively. I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's a really small percentage of new trips, 10% or something of that order. So this area will be busy because of all of the things that's happening. A new school, an air quality scheme that's taken out some capacity, and this. So it will be busy at the busiest times, and you know, they'll have to put up with that, I'm afraid. It's the way it will be.
Have we sort of got any figures as to what this will mean for the air quality, even though we've got one lane stopped in Ford Street? I'm
pretty sure that Environmental Health have taken that into account, have they not? They've certainly been, I'm fairly certain that they've done that, but as I say, there's not a huge amount of new trips, and I think that the principle of the air quality scheme on Ford Street, is it? Friars. On Stafford Street, sorry, is to restrict the amount of vehicles that can go through. So I don't think it will change, because what will happen is they'll be stuck on the periphery of the scheme. But I'm pretty sure that Carl's had a look at this and raised no objection.
Thank you, Paul. Members of the committee? Councillor Kerr, Councillor Carr, and then Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, and I do think that the design that we've got now is significantly better than the one we had before. I am disappointed, though, that in the discussion they haven't raised any issues about how environmentally sustainable it's going to be. It seems to have a flat roof that is pitched towards the north rather than towards the south, which you would expect if we want to put photovoltaics on it in due course, and I think that that is something that even at this late stage, it's a very slow, low pitch, but I think we ought to be ensuring that that actually could be useful for solar gain in the future as we try to achieve our zero carbon city. And also that it is constructed, an informationary note to say that could it be constructed able to bear the weight of photovoltaics, I think would be helpful as well. However, my biggest concern is the access for people on foot or by bicycle. A lot of the people who come here will be coming from the nearby housing, and they will probably be walking down Talbot Street or they'll be walking down Utoxeter Road. And both of those routes will require people on foot to be crossing the access to and from the store itself. And I think that that has not really been properly thought through. So as a simple changes that where we have those crossing points, can we make sure that they are pedestrian, not necessarily pedestrian priority, but to encourage drivers to give them a pedestrian's courtesy at that point. They're marked here as sort of stripy, zebra crossing-y things. But if we actually put them on plateaus so that it's meaning for the pedestrian, they haven't got to go down and up again, it will make a significant difference. And I think that could be going on the exit onto Mercian Way as well, because that's an important cycle route and pedestrian route around the city centre. And at the moment, that is being firmly cut by the exit. As you're exiting the car park, there isn't a rush to be doing that. The cars behind will be slow behind you as well. So that could be a plateau with giving the impression that that is a pedestrian cycle priority at that point. If you're arriving on the site by bicycle, although the cycle parking you see in the plan shown there is close to the entrance, which is just in that little red corner at the bottom, the cycle parking is adjacent, so you can leave easily, but to gain access to the site, you've got to come in the other entrance at the far end of the scheme, and there really should be a cycle route from this main cycle path alongside Mercian Way. You should be able to get there by bicycle without having to get off and turn into a pedestrian. Because turning into a pedestrian, the cyclist is actually going to be more obstructive to pedestrians as they wheel their bicycle into the cycle parking in that bottom corner. And I just do not think it's been properly thought through. If you're walking down Talbot Street from that dense terrace street area, many people will be walking in that way. You have to cross the exit and then you cross the car parking to be able to get to the main entrance to the store. And pedestrians won't naturally do that. They will naturally come to the closest point of the footway and be wanting to walk from there. And I think we need to look at the pedestrian desire line and design the car park to be pedestrian friendly. The same is true on the other side. If you've walked down Utoxeter New Road from the left-hand side in this plan, it's excellent having the crossing point in 2 steps if you're going to be a pedestrian going straight along the road. If you are crossing a little bit into the site, that is really useful additional crossing, so I welcome that. Again, should be on a plateau. But the next crossing point, which goes across the entrance to the loading bay, is out of alignment with the footpath across the front of the building. And that doesn't make sense, and again, it's something that should be looked at. I'm not clear how people who are parking on the far side of the car park, there's no guidance there as to what walking routes they should be taking rather than across the main entrance into the site, because people aren't going to walk back to the entrance to use that crossing point. So I don't think the car park is well designed, and I'd like to refer that back for further consideration, Chair, and for that plan to be further agreed with our highways team, if we may. Otherwise, I think that there is a lot to be said for it.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Paul, do you want to come back sort of individually or collectively to all these polls?
Thank you, Chair. I think we can deal with both the Councillor Kerr's concerns probably under one condition, to review the pedestrian circulation routes to make the pedestrian circulation more
And cyclists.
pedestrian and cyclist friendly.
Can you switch your microphone off, please?
Which would include the raising of the plateau at the pedestrian crossing, at the exit to the site, and potentially at the entrance to the site. So we'll make it, as a condition, effectively, review how a pedestrian will walk around that site. Because the cycle parking, I take your point, the cycle parking does look a little tucked away out of the way and could be made in a better, or split into a better location. So it's a general pedestrian and cyclist review of the scheme by condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor, sorry, was it Councillor West, Councillor Carr? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in general, I welcome this application. I think it's in quite a sustainable location. I'm pleased to see we had quite a lot of debate about the architectural merits when at conservation area, and I see they've taken most of our comments on board. So I think it sits well with the old engine shed across the road and the bonded warehouse. I tend to agree with Mr. Chamberlain that I don't think that the shopping traffic will be the big issue, because I think the word will soon get round at 3:30 when that school's turning out. You don't want to go shopping there. I've been for a walk up on there to have a look at the school, and I think they're making a really good job. That'll be opening soon, so I think there is going to be an issue with people, but I don't think it's largely down to the store. And the Utoxeter Road, which I drive up and down quite a lot, there seems to be a heck of a lot of people that walk up and down there. I guess mostly look like students, so I think this store is going to be in a good place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's going to be a lot of traffic there. You know, once the school opens, you've got Benrose Schools just up the road. I don't understand how they make this decision, because the council have taken one more lane off Utoxeter Road as well with the air quality, and it's going to be hectic. If you go there now at 5 o'clock, even 3:30, it's a massive queue, you know, all the way up to Normanton Road, all the way up Utoxeter Road. And I don't know how you can make a decision to go ahead with this. It's going to be a nightmare once they open. The school's going to be open. Benrose School is there. There's a Benrose infant school is there. And plus this traffic, I don't think this should go ahead. I won't be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? No? Would somebody like to move it to the vote? Councillor Carr? With the additional conditions. Are you seconding that, Lucy? Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation with the additional conditions? Any against? No. One. That recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. For those of you that are new to the committee, we come to the exciting part of future visits. Right. And to tell us about that is going to be Sarah, I believe.
Thank you, Chair, for bigging me up. Right, sorry, I'm just bringing it up on my screen. Now, we do have quite a number of major applications for members tonight. First one is the Royal Derby Hospital and a multi-storey car park that they want to put on top of the existing car park. The second one, oh, sorry.
Chair, may I just say to people that this is something that is being, local residents are really concerned about this because of the massing of it. And I think if people don't know that area well, it might be worth you going down and having a look at the location. If people want to have a site visit, that's fine, but if you could go and have a visit to look at it from the residential side, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. But, you know, for those that don't know the Royal Hospital, you can have a look. But I think, you know, majority of the people will be grateful for some extra parking spaces. But you should, you know, go and have a look if you feel you have any reservations. But by and large, I think residents of Derby will welcome that.
Chair, could I just ask, how many floors is this extension to the car park?
Sarah?
It's got 5 levels.
Thank you, Chair.
Sarah, is that 5 in total or 5 additional?
It's 5 total, so from ground floor up to the top.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah,
Okay.
next one.
Going to move on. Next one is a variation of condition for amendments to a car park layout for an improved industrial unit. So it's quite a small one, that one. This is an industrial unit on an existing business park on the East Service Road, just off Rainsway. So it's an existing commercial location.
You're not selling this very well,
No,
are
I'm
you?
not doing very well, am I?
Nobody's taken it. Not
saving the
one's
best
been
till
taken
last.
up yet.
Here we go. We've got 3 applications at Infinity Park, which members may well be aware of. One is flood mitigation, drainage, lagoon, landscaping works, external works off Infinity Way, which is the triangular bit at the bottom of your screen. The second one is for erection of a industrial unit, which is on the large area of land to the west. This is a large office, research and development, sort of warehouse facility, so I got the wrong one, on that site off Pioneer Way, which is just south of the Innovation Centre, I believe. And then
Are you not interested in this, are we?
I'm interested to have a copy of the slide before, where it shows the triangle, because I can't quite work out where that lies.
Is that the one on the west, the second one?
The triangle.
Oh, the triangle ones are along Infinity Way, so towards Chellaston. So they're currently sort of landscaped drainage areas.
I'm sure we can provide you a copy of that, Harvey, and you can go on your own to have a look at it.
Yeah, can I? Okay, so and the third one is this one, which is for office and research and development facility off Infinity Way, just near the Route 66 cycle route. And again, it's associated landscaping works, car parking, etc. This is 18 Agard Street. It's currently got a building on it which has been demolished, and they're proposing 4-storey apartment building, landscaping and car parking works. So you probably see it from Agard Street.
There's a good pub near there, Jed, if you want to go in.
I think this may be the last one. This is just a variation of condition for 3 conditions of the outline permission. So there's no development proposed this time. It's just variations to wording of them and conditions. Is that it, James?
Thank you, Sarah. That's about all that we have tonight. It's good night from me and it's good night from him. And thank you very much, and apologies once again to the newcomers. I'm not normally like this, but 16 years of looking down straight at the middle, but never mind, we'll get there in the end. Thank you very much.